Henry used to be the heart of his family, always active, full of stories, and deeply connected to his loved ones. But as Alzheimer's slowly steals his memories, his world shrinks into a fog of confusion. His days pass in silence, with Clara, his daughter, visiting as often as she can. One evening after Clara leaves, Henry hears a persistent scratching at the gate. Drawn by the sound but unsure of its source, he walks over and opens it. Standing there is a pit bull, its muscular body and scarred face striking against the dim light. Without hesitation or fear, Henry opens the gate wider and lets the dog in. The dog walks calmly into the yard, as if it knows this is where it belongs. Henry doesn't question the dog's presence. He can't remember if he's seen the dog before, but something about it feels familiar. The pit bull settles down at his feet, and Henry absent-mindedly pats its head. The next morning, Clara returns to check on her father. To her shock, she finds the dog sitting loyally beside Henry. At first, she's alarmed by the sight of the large pit bull. "Dad, where did this dog come from?" she asks. Henry looks at her, his face blank, and simply shrugs. Clara's worried, but Henry seems unusually calm and content with the dog by his side. She hesitates but decides to leave them be, not wanting to upset her father. As Clara drives away, she can't shake the feeling that something is different about her father, and about the strange dog that's found its way into his life. Over the next few days, Henry and the dog, now named Max, settle into a quiet routine. Max follows Henry everywhere, whether he's sitting in his favorite armchair or wandering aimlessly through the house. Henry, who often forgets where he's going or what he's doing, seems more focused with Max by his side. It's as if the dog's steady presence anchors him to the present moment. Max is gentle, patient, and never leaves Henry's side for long. He even sleeps at the foot of Henry's bed, keeping a silent vigil through the night. Clara, who visits regularly, is both curious and concerned. She tries to find out where Max might have come from. She contacts neighbors, posts online, and even calls local shelters, but no one seems to be missing a dog like Max. Despite her initial fears, Clara begins to trust Max. She notices that her father seems calmer, more at ease, and even a little more himself when the dog is around. Henry's usual forgetfulness doesn't seem as severe. He remembers to take his medication on time, something Clara had always had to remind him about. One day, Clara watches as Max gently nudges Henry toward the kitchen, where his pills sit on the counter. "Come on, Dad. It's like he knows what you need," she says half-jokingly. Henry chuckles and pats Max's head, seemingly unfazed. For the first time in a long while, Clara feels a small glimmer of hope. Maybe Max is exactly what her father needs, an unlikely companion to guide him through the fog of Alzheimer's. Clara can't help but notice the strange changes in her father. Henry has always struggled with remembering even the most basic details, his own address, what year it is, or even Clara's name on difficult days. But ever since Max arrived, there's been a shift. Henry starts to recall small, almost insignificant details from his past. It begins one morning when Clara visits, and Henry suddenly asks, "Do you remember that time you fell off your bike and scraped your knee?" "Your mother was so worried." Clara freezes, stunned. That memory is over 30 years old, long before Alzheimer's had set in. Henry smiles to himself, his hand resting on Max's head. Clara can't believe what she's hearing. Could her father really be remembering something so specific? And why now, after all this time? As the days go by, these small flickers of memory continue. Henry remembers the name of his old fishing buddy, the color of his wife's favorite dress, and even the day he bought the house they still live in. Each time these moments seem to occur when Max is nearby, often while Henry is gently stroking the dog's fur. Clara begins to wonder if it's more than just a coincidence. Max seems to have a calming, grounding effect on Henry, as if the dog's presence is somehow helping him break through the fog of his mind. Neighbors notice it too. Henry seems sharper, more engaged. Some dismiss it as a temporary improvement, but Clara is starting to believe that Max might be doing something far more profound. One stormy night, Clara gets a call from Henry's neighbor. "I saw your father wandering outside in the rain," the voice says, panic in their tone. Clara races over, fearing the worst. Henry's nighttime confusion is common, and it usually ends with him lost in the streets or injured. As she pulls up to the house, the rain pounding on her windshield, she expects to see her father drenched and disoriented. But to her surprise, when she arrives, she finds Henry safely back inside. Max is there, lying next to Henry, his coat wet from the rain. Clara quickly pieces together what must have happened. Henry, confused, had wandered outside into the storm, but Max had gone after him. Somehow the dog had managed to guide Henry back inside, pressing his body against him to offer comfort and warmth. Clara is overwhelmed with relief. She kneels down and pats Max, whispering, "You're incredible." Henry, a little dazed but unharmed, looks at Clara. "Max took care of me," he says softly, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Clara's heart swells with gratitude for the dog that has become her father's guardian in ways she never could have imagined. That night, as the storm rages outside, Clara sits with her father and Max, watching the dog rest peacefully by Henry's side. For the first time in a long while, she feels a sense of peace. Max isn't just a stray. They've been brought together for a reason. The dog has become more than just a companion. He's Henry's protector. As the days pass, Henry's connection with Max grows stronger. The once frail, forgetful man begins to exhibit bursts of unexpected strength. It's not just physical strength, but also mental clarity. One morning, Clara arrives to find Henry not only awake and alert, but also cooking breakfast. She stands in the doorway, watching in disbelief as her father carefully flips pancakes, humming an old tune he used to sing when she was a child. "Dad, are you okay?" Clara asks, cautiously optimistic. Henry looks up, smiling. "I'm fine, Clara. Just making breakfast. Max likes bacon, don't you, boy?" Max sits nearby, watching Henry with an intensity that seems almost human. Clara's stunned. Her father hasn't been able to manage even the simplest tasks for months, and yet here he is, cooking as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Over the next few days, these moments of clarity continue. Henry remembers how to fix the leaky faucet, organizes his medication without help, and even recalls the names of old friends Clara had long thought he'd forgotten. Each time Max is there, watching over him, Clara starts to feel something more than just gratitude. There's a mystery here she can't quite grasp. How is this dog able to bring out these changes in her father? Is it the companionship, the comfort, or is there something deeper at work? Clara decides to keep a closer eye on Henry and Max, hoping to understand the true nature of the bond that's transforming her father's life. One afternoon, while Clara is helping Henry organize some old photographs, something remarkable happens. Henry picks up a picture of him and his late wife, Margaret, taken over 40 years ago. His eyes light up as he holds the photo, a look of recognition crossing his face. "We took this on our trip to the Grand Canyon," he says softly, his voice clear and steady. Clara stares at him in shock. Her father hasn't spoken about their family vacations in years. She gently probes, asking him about the details of the trip. To her amazement, Henry remembers everything: the scorching heat, the winding trails, even the conversation they had while sitting on the canyon's edge. He talks about how Margaret had laughed at his clumsy attempts to set up the camera, a memory so vivid and detailed that it brings tears to Clara's eyes. As he speaks, Max sits quietly by Henry's feet, his watchful eyes seeming to follow every word. Clara can't shake the feeling that Max is somehow connected to these sudden bursts of memory. Whenever Henry struggles to remember, Max nudges him, as if urging him to hold on to the threads of his past. Later that evening, as Henry sleeps, Clara sits by the fire watching Max. The dog's presence feels almost magical, like he's not just a stray, but a guardian sent to bring her father back from the depths of Alzheimer's. For the first time, Clara dares to hope that maybe, just maybe, this bond between Henry and Max could restore more than just memories. It could bring back a piece of the man her father used to be. With each passing day, Henry's memories continue to surface. He recalls moments from Clara's childhood that even she had forgotten. Small, intimate details like the time she lost her first tooth, or the way she used to cling to his leg when she was scared. Each memory is like a gift, bringing Clara closer to the father she thought she had lost. But there's something else that begins to worry her. Max's behavior is becoming more unusual. The dog seems almost too in tune with Henry's needs, anticipating his confusion before it happens. guiding him when he falters. There are moments when Clara catches Max staring at her father with a depth of understanding that feels almost eerie. It's as if Max knows exactly what Henry's going through, as if he can see the battle taking place inside his mind. Clara decides to do some research. She spends hours reading about therapy dogs and their impact on Alzheimer's patients, but nothing she finds explains what she's witnessing. Max isn't a trained therapy dog, he's a stray, and yet the way he interacts with Henry goes beyond anything she's ever heard of. It's not just companionship, it's like Max is actively working to pull Henry back from the brink. As the mystery deepens, Clara begins to wonder if Max's appearance wasn't a coincidence. Could there be more to this dog than meets the eye? She knows one thing for sure, Max has changed their lives in ways she never could have imagined. But the question remains, how and why? Clara's curiosity drives her to dig deeper into Max's origins. She makes one final attempt to find out where he came from, visiting nearby shelters and scanning lost pet reports again. During one of her visits, she meets an old man at the local shelter who recognizes Max from her description. That dog? He's been roaming these parts for years. No one's ever been able to keep him, the man says, shaking his head. He shows up when he's needed, then disappears again. Clara's taken aback. What do you mean, when he's needed? She asks. The man tells her stories about Max, how he's been seen with people who were sick or lonely, always arriving at just the right moment and leaving once his work was done. Some people believed the dog was a guardian, sent to help those who needed him most. Clara doesn't know what to think. Could it be true? Could Max really be some kind of guardian? She returns home with more questions than answers. But as she watches Max and Henry together, she can't deny the feeling that something extraordinary is happening. Max's presence is more than just a coincidence. It's almost as if he was sent to guide her father through his darkest days. That night, Clara lies awake, her mind racing. If Max is here for a reason, what happens when his work is done? Will he leave? And more importantly, what will happen to her father when Max is gone? As winter approaches, Henry's condition seems to stabilize. He still has moments of confusion, but they are fewer and farther between. Clara begins to believe that Max's influence has given her father a second chance, a chance to live more fully in the present, even as Alzheimer's continues its relentless march. Max remains ever vigilant, his loyalty unwavering. But one evening, as Clara prepares dinner, she hears a loud crash from the living room. Rushing in, she finds Henry slumped on the floor, confused and disoriented. Max is beside him, nudging him gently, but this time it's different. Henry's eyes are distant, and Clara's heart sinks as she realizes that the clarity they've enjoyed may be slipping away again. The doctor arrives and tells Clara that Henry's condition is worsening. The reprieve they've experienced was temporary, a brief moment of grace. Clara feels a lump in her throat as she watches her father, who now seems even more fragile than before. Max stays close, but Clara can sense that the dog knows what's happening too. His eyes are filled with a quiet sadness, as if he understands the inevitable better than anyone. Clara sits beside Max, her hand resting on his head. "I don't know how you've done it," she whispers, "but thank you for giving us this time." Max looks up at her, his dark eyes reflecting her sorrow. It's in this moment that Clara realizes Max's true purpose wasn't to cure Henry, but to give them both the strength to face what's coming. In the final days of Henry's life, Max never leaves his side. Henry's moments of lucidity are rare now, but Clara treasures each one. The house, once filled with the sound of Max's paws padding across the floor and Henry's soft conversations, is now quiet. Clara knows the end is near, but there's a sense of peace in the air, a peace that Max seems to radiate. On a chilly December morning, Clara finds Henry sitting by the window, Max curled up beside him. Henry looks at her and smiles weakly. "It's been a good life, hasn't it?" he says, his voice soft but clear. Clara nods, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, Dad, it has." Max shifts slightly, his head resting on Henry's lap, as if offering one final comfort. Later that day, Henry passes away peacefully, with Max by his side. Clara's heartbroken, but she feels an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the time they were given. Max, who had been a constant presence throughout Henry's last months, seems to understand that his work is done. The next morning, Clara wakes up to find that Max is gone. She searches the house, the yard, and the neighborhood, but there's no trace of him. It's as if he disappeared into thin air, just as the old man at the shelter had said he would. Clara sits on the porch looking out at the empty street and smiles through her tears. Max had given them more than just companionship. He had given them hope, love, and a sense of peace in Henry's final days. The dog who had come from nowhere had left behind a legacy of love, and Clara knew that wherever Max was, he was continuing his work, offering comfort to someone else who needed him just as much.